join me for Ask the Good Doctor, live today and every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 12 noon Central Standard Time, and 10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. Bring your questions.
On my YouTube channel, on my YouTube channel. And please, if you could, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Yes. Ask the Good Doctor, LaJoyce Brookshire. Like, comment, and subscribe. Welcome to Ask the Good Doctor. I'm Dr. LaJoyce Brookshire. Thank you so much for joining us. We are here to help you attain, maintain, and reclaim your perfect health. Please grab your Good Doctor notebook. You are not going to want to miss a minute of this vital, life-saving information today. We've got with us Dr. Frederick Douglass Burton of the Burton Wellness and Injury Center in Philadelphia. And we are going to have a conversation about when COVID and the flu collide. Yes. And this is just part one, by the way. This is going to be an ongoing conversation. First of all, I want to talk about the difference between the flu and COVID. And the flu and COVID are both contagious respiratory illnesses, and they're caused by different viruses. COVID-19 is caused by infection with a new coronavirus called the SARS-CoV-2, and the flu is caused by infection with influenza viruses. Now, the CDC says because some of the symptoms of the flu and COVID are similar, it may be hard to tell the difference between them based on just the symptoms and testing alone, because this is why testing may be needed to help confirm a diagnosis. Flu and COVID share many characteristics, but there are some key differences between the two. What's similar, though, is both COVID and the flu can have different degrees of signs and symptoms, ranging from no symptoms, which is being asymptomatic, which is right where we are right now, to severe symptoms like fever, cough, chills, shortness of breath, difficulty breathing, fatigue, sore throat, runny or stuffy nose, muscle pain, body aches, headache, and some people may even have vomiting and diarrhea, though this is more common in children than in adults. But I say do not discount any segment of the population for any of these symptoms. And joining us today is a very special guest. He is my personal mentor, and I am pleased to be his mentee. Hello, Dr. Burton.
No, you the Joyce.
I am well. Thank you so much. Now, while COVID is still ever present in America today, another warning has come to expect the COVID crisis to continue deep into next year. And that's what Dr. Fauci says. And we need to hunker down and get through this fall and winter because it's not going to be easy. I was very pleased to hear Dr. Fauci tell the truth about that. Did you hear him say that?
I've been a little confused. I've been listening to Dr. Trump, and I'm not getting good information.
Okay, we're gonna let that go. We're gonna let that just roll on by. Yeah. We don't
Yeah,
want to listen to him, including drinking Lysol and Clorox, right?
exactly. Now, see, the one good thing about this pandemic is we do have a template. We have a history with a pandemic that actually was worse than this one. That's we're talking about the 1918 pandemic that they referred to as the Spanish flu, which actually did not come from Spain. It actually came from the United States.
Hmm.
But in fact, Philadelphia was the epicenter of that infection. There were 675,000 people in the United States killed, 15 million worldwide, but 12,000 in Philadelphia alone. In
Wow.
fact, the death rate was so fast and furious that they would pile bodies up outside of outhouses because there was just too many people to process.
Mm.
So, and the thing you have to remember now, this was 1918. There was no radio, there was no TV. There was no telephone. There was no Netflix. There was, there's very little information about that. There was no vaccines. There was no hope of a vaccine. There were very few therapeutics. So they were really flying blind and in trouble back in those days. And it lasted for about 2 years. So with the modern technology and the type of therapeutics we have today, I expect it's going to be with us for the better part of a year. We'll at least cut a year off the duration, but I think we're going to be with this until well into 2021.
Okay. Well, listen, that's one of the reasons why you're here, because I have always depended on you to give me the pure, unadulterated truth. So, what do you expect during this cold and flu season?
Well, I don't usually see very much problem with standard run of the mill influenza.
Mm,
Um, I I expect that there will be some cases, but unlike the propaganda you hear in the media, I don't really see a lot of flu cases. For instance, you might remember the swine flu
yes,
scare back in 2009 during the time Michael Jackson was dying. Um, I didn't see one case of swine flu. I just was looking around for
me
this
either.
anticipated flu that was going to kill so many people. But that's not to say that this COVID-19 is not real. This is real, and people need to pay very close attention and follow the basic guidelines. The basic guidelines do work, and contrary to Donald Trump's uh, criticizing his CDC head's uh, pronouncement that he believes that wearing the mask is probably better than the vaccine. I think it actually is. I think if you wear the mask, you maintain your social distancing, you maintain reasonable hygiene. I don't
Hmm.
think there's any problem with this. And further, if you're aware of the fact that there are some therapeutics that you can use to mitigate this virus,
I
which
want to get
could be
into that in just a little bit. What
sure.
do you make of the young people who are supposedly healthy who are falling ill to this disease?
Well, I think it's pretty much similar to what happens to adults, and that is, I think some of these kids just aren't healthy from the get go.
I agree.
Yeah,
I
they're not.
agree I agree with that.
Yeah, I think the people who are in a reasonably good health, just like with the flu, they tend to weather it pretty well. Some of them don't even manifest symptoms, but those that get symptoms tend to get by pretty well. Those patients of mine and family and friends who had been stricken with this and get right on the therapeutics that I recommend, they tend to, weather it pretty well. They don't do badly at all. So I think you
Listen,
just need help.
I had a 97-year-old aunt who made it through COVID.
Yeah, that's
She
pretty
sure
good.
did. It's pretty good. She
How
ended
how
up being,
how is she with pre-existing illnesses?
she takes one medication for high
Okay,
blood pressure.
that's why then, because her constitution is relatively good.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's good.
yes. Now she does have lingering effects, the after effects. She's weaker than she was before she
Yeah,
went into the hospital, and I think a lot of it has to do with laying in the hospital for 14 days.
that could very well be. I have a brother-in-law who was hospitalized with it, but fortunately, his wife, my sister, loaded him up with his supplements that I recommend, and he did fairly well before he even went into the hospital. And he's out now and recuperating, but he does have some residual, which in
Mhm.
his case, not some weakness, but there's some cognitive deficit also.
And your brother-in-law, you said
Yeah,
he is cognitively not as astute as he was.
exactly. He's a bit more forgetful. My sister says that she noticed he was having some problems prior, but they were in well, they got worse. That's the best
Hmm.
term to use. They just got worse.
Hmm. It seems like the medical community had a real opportunity to look at many people, especially the Black community, who have more underlying conditions than any other demographic in the early weeks of COVID. How come the medical community didn't learn anything about discounting any segment of the population back with, like, during AIDS? Like, you were the first physician who diagnosed a Black person with AIDS in the city of Philadelphia.
Exactly. It was interesting. But I think your question is, why did the medical community not see what exactly? I didn't get the gist of your question.
Why didn't they see that the underlying conditions were going to affect Black people, the Black community?
Well, it's not that I don't think that they saw. I just didn't. They didn't care too much about it until it started to manifest itself greatly in the workers, the frontline workers, as they call them,
Okay.
uh, because it impacted the economy greatly, especially in the meatpacking industry. Uh,
Yes.
the people who have to work in retail, particularly in stores, supplying goods to goods and services to the society. When they saw how that was happening, then it became an issue. But
That's right.
it just wasn't something you thought about before,
Because the workforce was injured.
and that's a problem.
Oh, yes.
Sort of like the day of absence.
Ah,
Yeah,
yes. The day of absence. I forgot about that.
yeah.
Well, what do you feel about COVID testing or the lack thereof?
Well, that's interesting because in the beginning of this pandemic, you heard a lot about testing and the value of testing. Well, my question was, what are we testing for exactly? Are we testing for the
Mm,
virus itself, which
mm,
requires a sophisticated test, which is called the PCR test, which stands for polymerase chain reaction? Are we testing for the actual substance that's causing the illness? Are we testing for the response your body had to the illness, which is antibodies? Now,
mm.
those are two different tests, and they tell you two different things. For instance, uh, if you were infected with the virus and your body responds by making antibodies, those antibodies can be around for the rest of your life. So they don't necessarily tell us if you have a new infection, are you infectious, or just what the situation is. Now, if you're testing and that's a cheaper test. The PCR test is a more expensive test, and that tests for the actual virus itself.
Mm.
So that's actually a more valuable test. But again, I was kind of leery as to whether these tests that were being given out so willy nilly in the beginning of this situation
Yeah.
were actually PCR tests, because those are expensive tests. And my question was, who's paying for those tests?
Mm.
We had people line up in parking lots and different places in churches getting these tests. What are you testing for? And then if you don't do contact analysis, the testing isn't that valuable. If you don't
Mm.
keeping track of where the person has been, who they've been in contact with, and doing something with respect to that, the test may be beneficial for the person to say, okay, yeah, I don't have it, or I may not have it. Then you got to deal with the fact that you may have false positives and false negatives. So, I was just not all that crazy about relying too much on the testing in the beginning.
Yes. And which brings me to my next point because the virus doesn't spread on its own. People spread the virus, especially those who are asymptomatic and not wearing masks because they're not taking this disease seriously. And I think that after 220,000 deaths, people would really wake up. And because they haven't, I think it speaks to the mental health crisis that COVID has ushered in.
Yes. Well, it exposed some very uh, bad mental problems and other health problems we have in this society, particularly with our president. He really got exposed with this, and it's interesting. I know we're not talking politics too much, but everything's political. I watched his presidency, and I said, he's riding this economy like this is a white stallion to the finish line, but
Mm.
something's going to hurt this economy eventually. And sure enough, COVID came and did it. So it's going to be real interesting how he rides the last couple of months to his election.
Oh, yes. Speaking of the president, what do you think of hydroxychloroquine?
I never did like it as a medication. I first became familiar with hydroxychloroquine when I was a resident back in the 80s, because it's the brand name is Plaquenil.
Hmm.
The generic name is hydroxychloroquine. Its use was, when my experience, was used primarily for lupus and certain other autoimmune disorders. But
Yeah.
one of the side effects that people don't hear about, that I used to shy away from it because of it, because it does cause visual impairment and can actually lead to blindness. So I don't see
Mm.
the benefit of hydroxychloroquine as being all that beneficial. Now, I think that the people who were promoting it for short-term use in terms of this virus. But I don't think that the side effects are worth the benefit. I think that there are other things.
Yes.
I think there are other things that have no side effects that are much more beneficial, and because they have no side effects, they have a great benefit because of that. And aside from the fact that they actually do help you to overcome the virus, because my general philosophy is that if you're fighting an infection, you want your immune system to fight the infection.
That's
You
right.
don't want to necessarily have some agent that destroys the bug itself. Now, that could be helpful. Like, say, in the case of syphilis, you have penicillin that actually destroys the bacterium that causes syphilis. But
Hmm.
in the case of Lyme and several other infectious disorders, I'd rather build up the person's white blood cell count, make those white blood cells more efficient, and load them up with calcium so that they can actually seek and destroy the invading agents on their own.
Yes. When we talk about the contact tracing part, when you say that the testing then becomes invalid without contact tracing, I saw the state of Ohio had a brilliant contact tracing chart with one man, 53 years old, who went to church on June 14th. And from that, there were 18 people at church who got infected from this one person. And those people then fanned out. The color chart was amazing. It looked like gumballs. Okay. Like he took it home. And of course, his wife was infected. His child was infected, even his 1 year old baby. And then somebody else on the chart, they went home and infected their daughter who went to work, who infected her boss, who infected his daughter who was 21. I mean, the layers. So this one person, they traced 91 people to having been in this as a result of this one person who went to church, and they showed up by the 4th of July. 91 people were infected by one person who went to church on June 14th. I count that as an incredible, and it makes for a good case for being mindful of where you are.
Exactly. And it just shows how highly contagious this organism is. And basically, what I tell people is when you're dealing with a virus, particularly like COVID, there's only basically three things it can do to you. It can either infect you and not cause you symptoms, it can infect you and cause you severe symptoms, or from which you recover, and then it can infect you and kill you. So
Yeah.
your three options. All during those times, you're infectious to others.
Hmm.
But the good thing about it is that it is self-limited. If a person was infected in March, they're not going to be infectious now. If they survive,
Yeah.
they're okay now. The only real question is, can they get it again? Because we assume that when a person gets a virus, they're going to be immune to it if they survive because their bodies built up antibodies. But there's been some question as to whether or not people who've been infected are getting infected again. So, if that is the case, then that kind of makes the vaccine concept moot because a vaccine is going to suppose to do is stimulate your body's immune response to make antibodies. But if those antibodies aren't going to be effective for long enough to say cover you till next year, why bother?
Okay. Well, I keep hearing of people who are being infected a second time, and they're being infected a second time with a completely different strain. And that is because this virus is mutating itself every 16 days. And when you have something that's so elusive, it's going to be hard to make tangibles for a vaccination. It's going to be nearly impossible with something mutating so quickly. And we can see that just by the symptomology. The first few symptoms were sore throat and and a cough and fever. Those were the first three symptoms. Now we've expanded to blood clots and pink eye of all things. And when you've got something that keeps adding on and another symptom and another symptom and another symptom, how then can they possibly come up with an effective vaccine?
Well, what you just said points out the fact that life is very dynamic. It's not
Mhm.
static. It doesn't stay the same.
Yes.
And Viruses are very, very interesting life forms.
Mm.
They can adapt, and as you said, they can mutate. So, I think we're going to see more and more over the next year or two of different things that this virus is able to do. Um, I think that we are going to have to think about a new normal. I know everybody's anxious, as I am, to get things back to where they were a year ago, and that would be real
Yes.
nice. But I think because of this experience, uh, we're going to have to be a little bit more careful about how we do things on all levels from this point on, because we don't know what this virus is going to do. We don't know if it's ever going to absolutely go away. We hope it will, but
It's true.
we thought it was going to go away when the weather got warm. Well, it's still here, and the weather's been warming. It's getting cold again. So it's going to be interesting. We just have to keep doing the things we know work, which is the social distancing, the hygiene, and the mask wearing. And I think eventually it'll get well enough so that it at least gets to the level of where we deal with a flu. Okay, the flu
Okay.
does kill a number of people, but we're able to manage the flu. We could take 30,000, 40,000 people a year dying from the flu, and most of those people are people who have pre-existing illnesses and don't know how to use the therapeutics.
I want you to hold that thought right there because I we have to flush that out some more because I do not count losing that many amount of people in on any day acceptable. But of course, in the standard of American medicine, it absolutely is. But don't go away. When we come back, more on Ask the Good Doctor with Dr. Fred Burton after this. Welcome back to Ask the Good Doctor. I'm Dr. LaJoyce Brookshire, and we are having a conversation with Dr. Frederick Douglass Burton of the Burton Wellness and Injury Center in Philadelphia about when the flu and COVID collide. Yeah, I always say, Houston, we have a problem, but we have an opportunity to keep our immune system strong and not participate in what the problem may be, right? Dr. Burton was just saying how the flu is expected annually to kill 30 to 40,000 people. And I am just over the moon about that being acceptable. I really don't want to hear that kind of thing. But Dr. Burton, when did they come up with a number like that? And why is a number so high acceptable?
Well, you have to understand, 1,000 people a day die in the United States from sepsis.
Okay.
So, and sepsis is a blood infection that can come from a scratch on your arm. A
Yeah.
lot of drug addicts who did intravenous drug abuse got sepsis. And in fact, ironically, there's a doctor in Virginia who's come up with an intravenous vitamin C combination along with vitamin B1 and hydrocortisone that's
Mm,
been turning those folks around in great numbers. But the point I'm making is that we know certain illnesses. So many people die every day from diabetes. So many people die every day from car accidents. We just know that there's a certain number of folks who are going to succumb from various illnesses. And we've kind of known over the decades that so many people are going to die from the flu. But again, it's sort of like the same thing with COVID. Most of the people who are going to die because they have pre-existing illnesses that lower their ability to fight off any kind of infectious agents.
that's right.
That's the problem.
It is a problem. I love that you're a medical doctor, a traditional medical doctor who chooses to practice alternative therapies. How did you get on this journey?
Well, as I told a gentleman earlier tonight who was trying to help me get set up on this show, I originally thought I was going to go into computers. That's what I thought was going to be my life's work. And in the 1960s, when so-called data processing was hitting the scene, that's where I was going. But the Vietnam War was also happening. And I was very cognizant of the fact that the Vietnam War was not a good thing for me to be involved in. So I didn't have the money to dodge the war like a lot of people can go to Canada or go to college. I couldn't afford to go to college and get a draft deferment that way. So my strategy was I joined the Air Force, and I go get my computer education in the Air Force. So I went down, listened to the recruiter. He said, "Come on in. We got you. We're gonna make you a computer specialist." So I signed up, and it took me 6 months to get in. But when I got in, the computer school was closed. So they looked around and said, "Well, Air Force needs come first. We need air policemen and medics, and you're too short to be a cop. You're gonna be a medic." So I said, "Do they work indoors?" They said, "Yeah." "Okay, good. We can do that." So I became a medic. And what was interesting about that experience is that they had me working in every department. I mean, because I didn't have a specialty, when you went to tech school, you can go to all the different specialties if you chose to, surgical tech, x-ray tech, whatever, and work in the healthcare field that way. The problem was all of those tech schools are in Texas, and I wouldn't get out of Texas. I don't like Texas. So I just left with the basic 4-week fundamental medical education training they give you. And I went to work in New Mexico at a hospital there in Clovis, New Mexico. And I spent 3 years, 2 months, and 3 weeks. Now, I felt bad about choosing that route, not going further, because my mother always told me, learn as much as you can. And the education was free. But it turned out to be a blessing in disguise because I did not have any kind of specialty. They rotated me through the entire hospital. They had to drive ambulances, help deliver babies, give shots, put on casts, go to crash sites. So I got a good feel for what healthcare was really all about. But now, when I got out of the military, I was not impressed because I didn't see anything that was really that helpful for my father, who was my hero. He was like a wonderful guy, but he was always sick. And when I got out of the military, I wanted to get a job, but I couldn't find a job anywhere but in the hospital because that was my experience. So I said, okay, I'll work in the hospital because I can get there in the evening, working 3 to 11:30 at night, and I can go to college during the day because most of my classmates from high school were graduating when I got out of the military, and I didn't want to spend 8 years in night school. So I said, look, I'm going to go to school during the day and go and work in the evening. So I did that. Fortunately for me, a guy I went to high school with who was a musician with me, we were both musicians. I played piano, he played trumpet. He was going to medical school, and I always had high respect for this guy because he was just one of the most likely to succeed guy. And we ran into each other in 1972. And we decided, since we hadn't played our instruments in a long time, we get together and play instruments. So we got together on Tuesday mornings, played instruments. The first Tuesday we got together, we played for 3 hours, just played, no talking. The next Tuesday we got together, we talked. And that's when he changed my life. He introduced me to the concept of alternative medicine, which I thought was unbelievable, because I had spent 3.5 years in the Air Force in hospitals, and now I'm working in the hospital at St. Joe's Hospital in the civilian hospital. No one ever talked to me about alternative medicine.
That's right.
What is that about? Tell me more about that. Well, after our conversation, I had the idea that I could avoid my father's chronic illnesses by just changing my lifestyle and my diet and getting into the herbs and things like that. So naturally, I said, sign me up. I like that.
Amen.
And he said to me, you should be a doctor. This was 1972. And I said, well, I don't know if that could do that. That's kind of hard. That's that's kind of like a guy like you, like most likely to succeed in high school, straight academics, 4-year scholarship to Temple. I thought that was the guy. That wasn't me. And he said, no, you should be a doctor. And I said, well, I'm interested in alternative medicine. Let me do some research in that. So I started doing some research, and for 2 years I researched along with my regular studies. And after 2 years, I realized the only thing I could do was go to medical school. There was nothing else to do. So I went to Temple Medical School to talk to some people there about what it took to get to medical school. And what was interesting is I was a junior at that time, and I was an urban affairs major because I was planning to go to law school at this time.
Oh, wow.
I'd never taken a science course, and I'd never taken a college science course. And after I came out of the advisor's office, I was clear about what I was going to do. Matter of fact, I could actually see doing what I'm doing right now that day, March of 1974.
Wow.
So I went to my friends and family, so I'm going to medical school. And everybody thought I was crazy except my parents. But anyway, 18 months later, I had a letter of acceptance to medical school. And I went. And all along the way, everybody thought I was crazy, of course, but I realized that medicine is a business, and I understand why it's a business. I understand the history of medicine.
That's right.
But what I do also understand is that if you're not healthy, none of those business models make much sense.
Sure don't.
Steve Jobs was 56 years old when he died. He had $7 billion in the bank.
Isn't that something?
He was a consummate businessman, but he didn't do too good on that life thing. So
Yes.
I decided that, it's the best thing is to be healthy. I mean, money's great. Just don't get me wrong, money's great. But dead people don't spend money too good. And
That's
healthy
it.
people wish they had health. All of
Yes,
them.
they do.
Everybody I know who's sick wish they was healthy.
Yes, they
So
do.
I said, and then the word health and wealth are the same word with one letter difference. So I think there's not a coincidence there.
That's
So
right.
that's how I got into this and never regretted it at all. It's
I
one of
like
those.
to call it. I like to call it healthy, wealthy,
Exactly. That's a good phrase. Good phrase. And in
because
spite of the adversities I have faced over the decades, I don't regret it. I still think it's the most noble thing I could have done. And
yes,
there was a brother named Sam Evans. He's one of my mentors. He died at 107. He was a businessman here in Philly, and he told me years before he died, he told me, he said, Fred, the best thing you can do to your enemies is outlive them.
yes.
So I'm trying to outlive my enemies.
All right. How about that?
Yeah.
One of the enemies that we have in our lives today is an overburden of toxicity in the body that take up residence and just hang around and live there. And one of the things that you taught me sitting on your couch, thank you so much for letting me sit with you and learn for 2 years after I got my doctorate degree. Thank you for letting me do that, because one of the greatest lessons that you taught me was that before the body can heal, and in order for the body to be well, we have to eradicate something in the body called a parasite.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes. Tell
Yeah.
us about your experience in learning about the parasites.
Well, in medical school, we spent 1 week on parasitology. We started on Monday. We got the final exam on Friday, and we were told at the end of the class that when we got to the national boards, we had to study for our license. Don't even bother studying about parasites because Western medicine considers parasites a third world problem.
Ha.
Well, I said, okay, that's fine. I can live with that. But that was in 1983, 84. No, it was 1979 when I was in medical school. Well, anyway, all through the years, I suffered from a problem with allergies to dogs and cats and occasional constipation. And I suffered from that from the time I was in college, through medical school, through internship, residency, and into my early practice. And in 1988, I was in my office in Allentown. Well, I was working in Allentown, Pennsylvania at the time, and had an office there where I met you. Well, I didn't meet you there, but that's where you studied with me. But it was 1988. A good friend of mine called me up, and he said, Fred, I got somebody I want you to meet. His name is Chief Two Trees. And I'm thinking, who the hell is Chief Two Trees? And he says, look, I think you need to listen to this guy. So he passed him in on a three-way. We talked, and he was introduced me to all these common ailments that I'm seeing all the time in my office. But he says they're nothing but worms. So I said, wait, you sure? He said, I'm telling you, it's parasites. I said, well, I got a problem. He said, what's your problem? I said, well, I'm constipated. He said, well, you just wormy. I said, oh, okay. I said, where do you live? He said, Old Fort, North Carolina. I said, okay, I'm coming to see you. So I got in my car the next month, which was a weekend before Labor Day, August 1988, and I drove through a hurricane to see Chief Two Trees.
All
And I
right.
spent 3 days on top of the mountain with him in Asheville, North Carolina, 40 miles east of, well, actually, Old Fort, North Carolina, which is 40 miles east of Asheville. And everybody was coming to him. He's giving us something for worms. And I said, Chief, why do you give everybody something for worms? He said, they all got them. I said, why do you say they all got them? He said, because this is their planet. We're visiting.
That's right.
I
That's
said,
right.
okay. He said, Fred, this is the wisdom of our fathers that we forgot when we started relying on white man's medicine. I said, okay. So I'm going to go home and do what you told me. So I went home after 3 days and listened to all these people sing his praises. I went home and I took his medicine. And my allergies, dogs, and cats, and constipation cleared up. I said, okay, let my kids do this. Now, my daughter was 13 years old, had horrible acne and anemia. We couldn't figure out why her hemoglobin was so low. Woman should be at least 12, ideally
Yes.
13. She was 9.5, falling asleep in class. And a good student, but just wasn't managing well all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
And my son was 8 years old. He had ringworm all over his body. We had taken to dermatologists, pediatricians, and nothing was working. So I said, you guys got to do this stuff. So at the time, the chief gave me 3 products. One of them was a liquid called Vermifree, which had 40% alcohol, but literally tastes like the devil made it. So I paid my children $1 a day to take this stuff. And they did it. They were they like that money. So anyway, Uh, 2 weeks after, well, they did it for 2 weeks, and they both totally cleared up. That was amazing. That was amazing. I called the chief and I said, Chief, thank you, man. That was worth the trip to North Carolina, really. He said, okay, Fred, now deworm your patients. They'll think you're God. So I started deworming my patients. Interesting thing happened, though. About a month after my children finished their program, my son came to me, 8 years old, and he said, Daddy, can I take that stuff again? And I'm thinking, wait a minute. Why would anybody voluntarily, maybe
Hello.
maybe wants the money, or it's 40% alcohol, maybe you got a buzz. I don't know. Why do you want to take this stuff again? He said, because I don't want to feel the way I felt before I took that stuff again. I don't want to feel the way I felt before I took that stuff again. That's what an 8-year-old told me. That's exactly what he said. And that's when I realized he was constipated. That cleared up too.
That's
So
right.
now I'm impressed. So I start treating everybody for parasites.
That's right.
And I started seeing all kinds of things get better. And I came to the conclusion that we were woefully miseducated in medical school. We were told that this was a third world problem. And if it's a third world problem, America is third world.
Amen.
We're loaded. And I couldn't practice if I didn't deworm everybody. I just couldn't
That's
do
right.
it.
That's
Yeah.
right. And it is that exact mindset that I have adopted as well. I don't care what your problem is. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to get at those worms. We're
That's
going to kill the wormy things that are hiding in you, that are causing you distress, that have set up residence, and we're going to change your diet. Dr. Burton, how important is it for when people come to you to clean everything out? The gut, you've just talked about the parasites. What else do you have them clean up in terms of their living and their everyday living so that they can be well?
Well, one of the things I've learned recently in the last few years is I've been on a constant search since 1972 when I had that fateful conversation with Charles, the gentleman that introduced me to alternative medicine, to alternative ideas. I've been looking for how human beings should eat because we have to eat. And the one thing we all do that I think we have the least amount of information on is food and diet and how we should eat. So I've been on a quest to find out how human beings should eat because the most common toxicity we develop is food toxicity. We just eat the wrong stuff and the food is
And
bad.
too much of it.
Yeah, too much of it. And I understand now, since I've studied Gundry, I started to study this guy named Stephen Gundry's work. And I think Gundry's kind of put his finger on the whole diet issue because I studied Weston Price, I studied Pritikin, and I studied macrobiotics, I studied vegetarianism, Dick Gregory, I studied everybody. But it was always something missing. Well, when I started studying Gundry's work, what I found is that he kind of tied up all the missing links. Everything started to make sense once I understood his principle. And what he's saying is basically this, which ties into everything. It ties into life in general. And that is that life itself is highly intelligent. Life is intelligent. We like to think, oh, there's intelligent animals and there's non-intelligent. And
That's right.
Life is intelligent. That's why it's here, and that's why it continues to be here. So that takes, as Francis Cress Welsing taught me, intelligence is decoding your environment
Yes, it
and being
is.
successful in it.
That's
And
right.
worms are very intelligent.
Yes, they are.
Viruses are extremely intelligent.
Very intelligent. And I would say that COVID is intelligent.
Oh, no doubt. No
And
doubt.
what do you recommend? What is your protocol, your favorite protocol that you recommend if people contract COVID?
Well, the protocol that I've used for the last 30 years, and I've just modified a little bit, is beta carotene and garlic. I learned from a doctor in California named Gary Gordon, who taught me back in the 80s that, look, if you have a viral situation, which flu and various other viruses are, what you want to do is you want to give your immune system the best help it can at killing the virus. And what he found was beta carotene, which is a relatively cheap form of vitamin A, meaning the beta carotene is converted to vitamin A by the liver. So if you don't have a liver problem, beta carotene is fine. If you have a liver problem, you got to bypass the beta carotene and go straight to vitamin A. Exactly. But you need to take 400,000 international units of it. You need a big dose. The recommended dose is somewhere around 5,000 or so,
Yeah.
2,000. You want 400,000 international units of that a day while you have the virus or while you have symptoms. and you want 6,000 milligrams of garlic. Now, my wife likes the odorless because she doesn't like the smell of garlic. And that's interesting. I don't really care. I just want to get the virus dead.
Hello.
So, 6,000 milligrams of garlic, 400,000 international units of beta carotene or vitamin A. And what I've done since the COVID is add vitamin C, 5 to 10,000 milligrams. Each thousand is a gram, so 5 to 10 grams of vitamin C.
Yeah,
And that's each day until you get better and you start taking it at the first sign. When you first know something's not right,
that's
that's
right.
when you jump on it. And usually within 5 to 7 days, you're in good shape. You
That's
know,
right.
so that's the way I handle it.
And what I learned from you is this protocol overwhelms the virus and it
Exactly.
decreases the duration and the intensity of it.
That's exactly.
And all of my people can report that as well. And I have somebody here that we're going to introduce you to. It's testimony time when we come back. So don't go away. More on Ask the Good Doctor after this. Welcome back to Ask the Good Doctor. I'm Dr. LaJoyce Brookshire, and it's testimony time on Ask the Good Doctor. As Dr. Burton was just telling us about the protocol that he favors most for COVID, this is if you have COVID. This is not for prevention. This is in case you actually contract the virus and you know something's not right. I encourage you not to go to bed when you know something's not right. Grab hold of these things. But it's testimony time. We've got Andrea with us to tell us about how she used this very thing, but not for herself. She heard me talking about it on the radio. Hi, Andrea. How are
Yes.
you?
Hello there. Hello there, everyone. How are you?
How are you?
So tell us all about your story and your family and the event, Andrea. We have just a few moments.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, July 1st and July 4th, around that time, my son had a big event, 4th of July party and also a book signing party that he had. And most of the people there, a lot of my family members did contract COVID-19. And when I didn't attend, I stayed home. But when I found out that they did contract it, and I had just taken your wellness course maybe about a month ago or something like that, and you recommended the combination of the beta carotene and the garlic. And I called my cousin and I said, hey, you guys did tested positive. So I attended this wellness course and I advised you guys to do this regimen. And they all did. It was like how many of them? Four. And I'm gonna tell you, I have an aunt. She did it. She's 71. Now she didn't go to the party, but my niece brought it over to her. And
Yes.
she has diabetes. She's 71 and she didn't have any symptoms. Like when she had contracted, she started having a little like runny nose. But
Yes.
my cousin, he mailed her the regimen that I told my other cousin, and she started taking it, and she said she was fine. And I didn't know they took it until my brother came home, and he said, "Hey, they say he was taking the thing that you told us." Oh, they started doing it. I didn't know.
Well, listen, we have Dr. Burton to thank for that
Yeah, I thank
because
you so much. That was the miracle worker. I am so, oh man, that's a blessing. Even with me now, Dr. Brookshire and Dr. Burton, when I feel something like I had a headache the other day and I was around a few people, I said, oh God, I just started taking. And then the next day it clears right up. I'm like, okay. So that's
okay.
my go-to drug. Okay. I thank you so much for that regimen. Both of you guys. You guys are definitely a blessing.
Oh, well, you are so welcome.
Definitely.
Dr. Burton, we can't hear you anymore. I don't know why.
I think a little bit of static somewhere.
Okay. Go
Oh,
ahead. Say what were you saying? I hear you now.
You hear me?
Yes, we hear you.
No. What I was saying is that made my day. Good story. I hear stories like that all the time.
oh my God,
All
that's
the
a
time.
blessing. Ooh, you guys are a blessing to our people, and we need to let everyone know because if this thing is going to be around with us for a while, we definitely need to strengthen everybody's immune system, like you guys say, and get us ready.
We're going to
Yeah,
need to because, again, as I said earlier, medicine is a business model. It's about
mhm,
Yes.
making money, and I understand that. But we need to understand that we have to find ways that really help us aside from what they're talking about doing.
that's true. That is
Yeah,
so true.
I
Thank
wanted
you.
the two of you to be on this program today because Andrea contacted me ecstatic, Dr. Burton,
Yes.
when her family got these positive results. Just think about how many lives were saved as a result of using beta carotene in garlic. So
Mhm.
we have got the beta carotene and the garlic up on the screen for you. If you want to detoxify your body, grab my book, The Detox Edition Remix for a Healthy New You. If you'd like a phone consultation with me, please contact me at askthegoodDoctorTV@outlook.com. That's askthegoodDoctorTV@outlook.com. Andrea, thank you so much for being here.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
your
Thank you
testimony.
guys. Thank you guys.
Dr. Burton, thank you so much for all that you do. Thank you for allowing me to sit on your couch for 2 whole years and bring my baby and let everybody in the office babysit my child. I appreciate you for learning. And Dr. Burton actually helped me get pregnant because I was like, I'm
Wow.
having a problem. I can't get pregnant. He said, take your temperature. My temperatures were in the toilet. My temperatures were 89, 87. And
Wow.
then he said, what's the name of your pharmacy? I was like, oh my gosh, you're going to write. He said, I do write prescriptions every now and again. This is going to work. And 2 months later, I was pregnant.
Whoa.
He took care of that.
Wonderful.
I was pregnant.
That's
And
great.
so we've been along on this journey ever since. Thank you, Dr. Burton. I appreciate you and your wealth of knowledge. And that's the Burton Wellness Injury Center in Philadelphia. If you're nearby, stop on in and see him or contact me or Dr. Burton for a phone consultation. Well, that does it for me. I'd like to thank my team, Irving Wright, supervising producer, and Chris Green, associate producer. To let your eyes shine, cut back on the wine, get good food fast, and go easy on the greasy. Until next time, I'm Dr. LaJoyce Brookshire, here to help you attain and maintain your perfect health. Let's do it again next week, okay? God bless you.